What's good, Modern Retro Show family? It's Teacher Ready back with another ERB reaction. So this one is George Carlin versus Richard Pryor. So I am a huge fan of stand-up comedy and of course know a lot about the history of stand-up because I just love to learn stuff. What can I say? I'm a sponge for knowledge. So I would definitely put Carlin and Pryor both on my Mount Rushmore. Along with probably Eddie Murphy, I would say, and Dave Chappelle. But let's get into it. I'm very excited for this one. So again, trying to keep my streak alive. So whenever I choose somebody who I say, well, I really love this character, they end up losing. So in this one, I definitely got to put Richard Pryor as my number one. I love Richard Pryor. The man was a genius. And so that can only mean that Richard Pryor is going to lose here.
George Carlin versus Richard Pryor.
Here we go with George Carlin. I'm a mad dog's darling. I was born in the Bronx and brought up in Harlem. I'm dope.
All right, so right away, you know the pause finger is going to be in full effect with these ERBs. If you just want to watch a watch along with somebody just going, huh, that's funny. Plenty of other people out there, but I'm going to break these down, of course. George Carlin, of course.
George Carlin. I'm a mad dog.
Mad Dog snarling. So yeah, George Carlin was definitely a mad dog with his comedy. Of course, also with the gruff voice. So that could be another reference to Mad Dog.
Darling, I was born in the Bronx and brought up in...
Yeah, no, because I read all of Carlin's books, and Carlin was born in Manhattan, if I'm not mistaken. He did grow up in Harlem, but Harlem is in Manhattan. So I'm not sure if he was actually born in the Bronx. Could be, I don't know.
In Harlem, I'm dope and spitting bars and getting crowds hardy harring while you're the least threatening black dude since Carlton. Now this...
Oh, come on. So I'm dope at spitting bars. Obviously going to pat himself on the back for his ability to drop these rap bars, but also spitting bars on stage, right, in his stand-up.
Bars and getting crowds hardy...
Getting crowds hardy harring to get them to laugh, of course.
While you're the least threatening black dude.
Least threatening black dude since Carlin? No. I cannot sign off on that one. Richard Pryor, if you want to say least threatening black comedian, I would go with somebody like Bill Cosby. Even though I loved Cosby's stand-up, but Cosby was clean cut, always dressed with the Cosby sweaters and the suits and everything, and never cursed in his comedy. Of course, Eddie Murphy points that out in Eddie Murphy Raw, you know, the difference between Cosby and Richard Pryor, right? Cosby calls up Eddie Murphy. He's like, you can't, use those words, that filth, floor and filth, floor and filth. And then Eddie Murphy calls Richard Pryor, and Richard says, next time that motherfucker calls, tell him I said suck my dick. Right? So I could not sign off. Richard Pryor was definitely always pushing the limits. He had, even when they gave him a network TV show, which God knows why you would give Richard Pryor, of all people, that got pulled quick because obviously his skits were not made for television. So I'm not co-signing on that one, George Carlin. Sorry. And of course, Carlton, for those who don't know, just in case, Carlton was a character on the show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which starred Will Smith. And Carlton was just kind of like Bill Cosby, right? Very upper crust, always wore ridiculous looking sweaters, did the Carlton dance, obviously, and very white bread would be, the improper way of saying it, I guess. But you know what I mean.
Carlton, now there's 7 words you can't say on a TV set. Well, this is the pissin' fucking cuttin' internet and my cocksucking motherfucking...
Okay, so that's a very famous bit by George Carlin, the 7 dirty words, right? Motherfucker, cocksucker, piss, cunt, shit. I think he mentions all of them here, though.
TV set. Well, this is the pissin' fucking cuttin'...
Yeah, piss, fuck, cunt,
internet and my
cocksucker,
motherfucker,
tits, and shit. Shit's the other one.
Non-stop and brain droppings like my wits got the...
There we go. My wits got the shits. So he said all 7. Very well played.
My cocksucking motherfucking bits on the tits non-stop and...
Yeah, Brain Droppings. Brain Droppings is actually my favorite book by George Carlin. So Brain Droppings is literally, it's just a book filled with all types of like brain farts and random thoughts by George Carlin. But I remember reading it back in college, and I remember sitting outside reading, smoking a little smoke, and I was laughing hysterically while reading that book.
Brain droppings like my witch got the shit. So call it Pryor. I doo-doo on you constantly. No pauses in my punchlines, no commas in my comedy. You'll be down for the count.
Yeah, so no pauses in my punchlines. I doo-doo on you. Prioria. I don't know. I kind of feel like George Carlin's... I mean, he could do so much better. Really? Prioria? I doo-doo on you.
Doo-doo on you constantly. No pauses in my punchlines, no commas in my comedy. You'll be down for the count.
Yeah, so he was known for his kind of stream of consciousness type, counterculture comedy. I mean, he was just relentless. He had something like 15 HBO comedy specials, like the most of anybody. You'll be down for the count.
When this counterculture counterman serves you with a stand uppercut, you can't counter.
Okay, that was a good one. You'll be down for the count.
When this
counterculture counterman. So yeah, a lot of his comedy was counterculture comedy, which is not how he started out. The interesting thing about Carlin is starts out, George Carlin, in the late 50s, early 60s, up until about 1962, 63, when he's arrested, actually with Lenny Bruce. That kind of changes him, and it changes his comedy. But prior to that, if you look at his early stuff, he's always dressed like in a nice suit. He's cleanly shaven. His hair is, done up. And his comedy was very clean cut, very PG. But he does eventually, after his arrest and spending, time, having issues with the law, he does become a counterculture comedian. But the next line...
Culture counterman serves you with a
stand uppercut. So again, double meaning there, right? Because what do the comedians do when they perform? Stand up comedy. And of course, an uppercut. He's going to serve him with an uppercut that you can't counter, right? It's a boxing term, right? So boxers on the defense are always trying to counter the other their opponent, and the other opponent is of course trying to land some punches, and one of the most devastating punches is the uppercut, especially if it's coming from Mike Tyson. That Mike Tyson double pump uppercut, one to the chest, one to the bottom of the chin, and you're done, right? So great, again, double meanings, which I love in these ERBs.
Counter down, wilder than Gene when I'm killing the beat. You're steady taking second place. That's the silver streak.
Okay. Let's see.
Wilder than Gene.
I'm wilder than Gene. So Gene Wilder, for those who don't know, you probably know Gene Wilder from the movie Willy Wonka. He was the original Willy Wonka in the 1970s movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But Gene Wilder was a partner in several really big hit movies with Richard Pryor. Gene Wilder was married to Saturday Night Live Gilda Radner, who unfortunately in the 80s passed away from breast cancer. But throughout the 70s and into the 80s, Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder were like box office dynamite. And they made several really big movies like Stir Crazy, and also one of them was Silver Streak.
When I'm killing the beat, you're steady taking second place. That's the
Silver Streak. So that references a movie, but also references the fact that Richard Pryor always received second billing whenever he did a movie with Gene Wilder, and Richard Pryor was not happy with that, of course, because he felt he was the real draw, but of course Gene Wilder felt he was the real draw. But again, the last movie I believe they do together is called See No Evil, Hear No Evil, where I think Richard Pryor is blind and Gene Wilder is deaf, and then antics ensue.
silver streak.
Any rap battles with you, I be winning them. Your style's like 2 drinks, it's the minimum.
All right, coming out with a good hit there. So any battle
Rap battles with you, I be winning
they'll be winning them.
them. Your style's like 2 drinks, it's the
2-drink minimum. So again, if you've ever been to a stand-up comedy club, of course, in New York City here, we have tons of them. And I've seen some of the greatest of the greats. I've seen Andrew Dice Clay, Rodney Dangerfield, Dave Chappelle. I mean, the best of the best. I never got to see George Carlin, though. And of course, I never got to see Richard Pryor, way before my time. But whenever you go to a comedy club, aside from paying a cover fee usually to get in, there's a 2-drink minimum, right? You have to order 2 drinks while you're in the club. And he's saying, of course, the 2-drink is the minimum, and so is your comedy. You're just delivering the minimum.
The minimum. It's your boy from Peoria, Illinois. One hand on my mic, one hand on my groin.
So yeah, Richard Pryor was born in Peoria, Illinois. So Richard Pryor was actually, he grew up in a brothel. He grew up in a whorehouse. His mother was a prostitute, and his grandmother, Clara Miller, I believe was her name, she owned the brothel. She was a madam. And Richard Pryor in his stand-up, especially in like the 70s and late 60s, would always talk about the differences between black people and white people. And one of them was, you know, black people always holding on to their dicks, right?
Cause ain't no set tighter in this whole damn game. Even the shit that I spit off the top flames.
Ooh. So he's taken something that I thought George Carlin would hit him with right away. So Richard Pryor, one of the geniuses about him, he didn't really tell jokes. He told stories, and especially stories about like really dark places in his life, because Richard Pryor had a severe addiction to cocaine and eventually started freebasing cocaine. He started smoking it. And he had several instances. He had a couple of heart attacks, a lot of domestic violence issues. One time he even shot up his wife's car, and he talked about all that on stage. And he delivered it in a way I recommend, if you haven't seen it yet, Richard Pryor Live on the Sunset Strip. And then there's another one just called Richard Pryor Live. I believe it was filmed in 1976 or 77. He just has a red shirt on. And Live on the Sunset Strip was around 82, 83. And he has a red suit on with a black shirt. 2 of the greatest stand-up comedies you will ever see. And in the 77 version, he talks about having the heart attack. But in the 83 version, he talks about there was a famous incident in 1980 or 81, I believe it was. I think it was 80. It was the year that John Lennon was killed. Richard Pryor was freebasing and ended up setting himself on fire because he was mixing alcohol at the time. There's a whole story that he actually tried to commit suicide by pouring the alcohol on himself and setting himself on fire. But either way, Richard Pryor catches fire and ends up running down the street on fire. He suffered massive burns all across his body. So again, he's taking the reference and putting him against himself. He's like, off the top of my head, you know, these raps are coming off the top of my head. I'm just improvising here, son. I'm scatting, you know, it's like fire, flames, right? So it's also the double meaning of the time he set himself on fire. But he even makes fun of that, right? He tells a story of how people were making fun of him. He lights a match and then he runs it across and he goes, "What's that?" "Richard Pryor run down the street," right? So he always poked fun at himself and even like really dark shit he was going through. Like when he was smoking coke, you know, he would be like, the pipe would be talking to me. Rich, where you going, Rich? You ain't got nowhere to go? You come here, smoke with me, Rich. Stay with me. He has this whole hilarious bit about how Jim Brown tries to come to his house, and his crack pipe's like, "Man, fuck Jim Brown. Jim Brown don't know shit." Yeah, so definitely I love Richard Pryor.
My delivery is rupture in the dummies. You tell a joke and people go,
that's funny.
My mama was a prostitute and
That's kind of true. George Carlin is brilliant. I love George Carlin, but I never found George Carlin to be laugh out loud funny. More like intellectual, like, man, that is brilliant. But I never laughed out loud with Carlin, to be honest with you. So I do agree with him on that point. Whereas with Richard Pryor, it was just fucking hilarious. or the time where he tells a story how he was working in the strip club as an MC that was owned by the mafia, and one of the performers was like, they ain't paying us, and he's like, fuck that, they're paying me. And he goes in there with a starter pistol, which is just basically a cap pistol, and he tries to demand his money, and all the mafia dudes start laughing at him, and they kind of like bring him in. He's like, hey, come in here, Rich, do the thing with the gun. And he's like, he sticks up the gun. He's like, give my money. And they all start laughing, and they kind of like take him in. It's absolutely hilarious.
In the dummies, you tell a joke and people go,
That's funny.
My mama was a prostitute and grandma ran the brothel.
Yeah, so like I already mentioned, that is absolutely true.
See some shit, but not as awful as your haircut debacle. I'm the original brother.
The haircut debacle. Yeah, so I kind of mentioned
Grandma ran the brothel. See some shit, but not as awful as your haircut debacle.
So the haircut debacle. So like I mentioned before, at first Carlin is very clean cut. Suit, tie, shirt, hair, no beard, shaven. And then he's arrested because in the 60s, it was illegal to curse on stage, to talk about sex on stage. And one of the pioneers was Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce was constantly being arrested. And even, went to the upper courts. Eventually, Lenny Bruce just gets consumed by it. He would actually read court transcripts in his stand-up, and people were like, what the fuck is this? And Lenny Bruce overdoses, meets a tragic end. But a lot of other comics, along with Lenny Bruce, were also trying to support him, even though there were very few. And George Carlin was one of them. So in 1962, Carlin is arrested right, alongside Lenny Bruce. And the whole thing changes Carlin. And Carlin all of a sudden comes back, and now he's got the beard and his usual, the delivery that we're all used to. He grows his hair out. He's not wearing a suit anymore. I mean, it's the George Carlin that we come to know and love. But people were like, what the fuck is this guy? Right? And he's like lost all of his support, all of his popularity, and it took him years to rebuild his reputation. So they call it the haircut debacle, right? Which happened again in 1962.
Debacle, I'm the original brother. They give the scene some color. The most iconic stand-up comic, stand down, motherfucker.
You forgot the cause and you know it's a mistake.
What the fuck, really? The cause? Oh shit, Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby, hide your drinks, fellas, because Bill Cosby's around. You better cover them motherfucking drinks, because his dick is about to come out and somebody's getting fucked. Somebody's getting sleepy, and then they're getting fucked.
The most iconic stand-up comic, stand down, motherfucker.
You forgot the cause and you know it's a mistake. I eat MCs for breakfast like the major chocolate cake.
Yeah, so Bill Cosby does predate Richard Pryor. And again, like I said, if you want to talk about clean-cut, non-threatening African Americans, as far as, for the white crowd to accept, Bill Cosby fit the mold, right? Bill Cosby was this clean-cut, non-threatening, white people accepted him. He never cursed in his comedy, never worked blue, and he did have a whole bit. He would talk a lot about family, a lot about, think of it like Louis C.K., but not vile, disgusting, or cursing. But he would use a lot of his kids in his stand-up, his wife. He would talk about family. He would talk about trips to the dentist. He would talk about chocolate. He had a whole bit about chocolate cake. And of course, he's coming in because he feels like he's the original, right? Because at first, Richard Pryor did try to emulate Bill Cosby, Eddie Murphy as well. Bill Cosby was, a big icon because not only was he a stand-up comic, but Bill Cosby also, he had a hit television show. Then eventually he creates Fat Albert, right, which becomes a hugely popular cartoon, which kind of like he would interrupt like he does here. He would come in with, hey, because the catchphrase for Fat Albert was, hey, hey, hey. And it was an all-black cartoon. It was way ahead of its time, and it was a big deal. It just, Cosby, unfortunately, like a lot of men, fucked himself over because he couldn't control his dick. It's very unfortunate.
I'm the greatest. What's wrong with Blair? Did somebody put something in my
Oh, they didn't. Oh my god, they roofied the cause. Holy shit.
What's wrong with Blair?
What's wrong with my lip? So yeah, he had this whole bit about his visit to the dentist and how they gave him the laughing gas, right? And also, I can't feel my face and my lip is in my lap.
Somebody put something in my pudding.
In my pudding, right? So of course, famously Bill Cosby, aside from eventually then, so he had a hit show. I forget what the show was called. It was like a cop show or something. That was a big hit. It was like the first like black and white like partner type show. Then of course he had Fat Albert, but then of course the Cosby Show was a massive hit. It was one of the biggest shows of the 80s. And in the 70s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, Bill Cosby was the spokesman for Jell-O. The pudding pops and the Jell-O puddings, and this is the worst Bill Cosby impression ever. Bah.
And the machine, you put something in the pudding.
Roofing the cars.
Oh, shut up, you stupid son of a bitch. You know you blew it. I'd have attacked you.
Oh, shit. Joan Rivers? Really? Not a huge fan of Joan Rivers. I think she was all right. I mean, she was a pioneer as far as women stand-up, so I respect her for that, but I never found her funny.
Oh, shut up, you stupid son of a bitch. You know you blew it. I'd have attacked you.
Yeah, he did blow it. She's absolutely right. I mean, Bill Cosby was just a beloved figure. And then Hannibal Buress, who I love Hannibal Buress. If you've never watched Hannibal Buress stand up, watch him. He's hilarious. Hannibal does a stand up, and it was filmed by somebody in the audience. He was just at like a local club, right? Just polishing his set. And he basically said what a lot of people knew, but he actually said that shit on stage and called out Bill Cosby for being a rapist. And somebody posted it online, and that shit blew up. It was basically Hannibal Buress sank Bill Cosby. Prior to that, I mean, he was Dr. Bill Cosby, right? He got an honorary doctorate. So yeah, he did blow it.
You first, but your heart beat me to it. Cosby, you.
Yeah, I would attack you first, but your hearts beat me to it. So George Carlin and Richard Pryor both had several heart attacks during their lifetimes. Again, I think Carlin talked about it, but for sure Richard Pryor talked about it in that 1977 special. Like this whole experience of what it felt like having a heart attack. But then both of them eventually die of heart attacks. You know, because obviously a lifetime of cocaine use is going to do that to you.
You can't be here. You're making people nervous. So let me end you real quick like I was Hannibal Buress.
There you go. She called him out. Yeah, Hannibal Buress. You can't be here.
You're making people.
You're making people nervous. Yeah, well, I'd be nervous around the cause too.
Nervous. So let me end you real quick like I was Hannibal Buress.
Like I was Hannibal Buress. Yeah, so I told that story.
It turns out you were just like your sweater. Monster.
Yeah, the Cosby sweaters, man. The Cosby sweaters were... my friend Rob wore Cosby sweaters. He still wears Cosby sweaters. Those things are fucking hideous. But yeah, the Cosby sweaters, like Bill Cosby on The Cosby Show would wear these just awful looking sweaters all the time, and they just became notoriously known as Cosby sweaters.
The men that I slept with only wish they were unconscious. My sex jokes offend. You're on the sex offender registry. Oh, who you with only wish they...
I'm telling you, so far, actually, I think Joan Rivers is winning this battle. So yeah, she would, a lot of her stand-up was just making fun of herself. Self-deprecating humor was her thing. And she would talk a lot about her sex life as well. So yeah.
They were unconscious. My sex jokes offend.
My sex jokes may offend, but you're on the sex offender registry. So we all know, well, hopefully you know. Actually, that's one of the scariest things. If you check the sex offender registry and you start looking around your neighborhood and you're like, what the fuck? Why are there so many sex offenders living in my neighborhood?
The sex offender registry. Oh, who are you wearing now? Is that state penitentiary?
Oh my God. Joan Rivers, my mom used to watch that fucking show all the time. She had this show on E with her awful fucking daughter, and they would interview people on the red carpet and shit, and they would always ask, oh, who are you wearing? I love that. Who are you wearing? Ooh, it's a Donatella Versace. Like So yeah, and they would like rate people's outfits and shit, and especially her fucking daughter. I never got what the fuck her daughter had to do with anything. But yeah, that was the who you wearing state penitentiary. Yeah, enough with the roofies. So of course, unless you've been living under a rock, Bill Cosby was eventually called out by like several dozen women for slipping roofies into their drinks and then sexually assaulting them. And he ended up going to prison. I don't know if he's still in prison, but I know he ended up going to prison.
Enough with the roofies. Let me move on to Rufus. My joke.
Let me move on to Rufus. Oh shit!
Is that state penitentiary? Enough with the roofies. Let me move on.
Let me move on to Rufus. So, of course, George Carlin, while didn't have as big an acting career as Richard Pryor or even Bill Cosby, Joan Rivers also, I mean, she was in Spaceballs, though. But Richard Pryor has, you know, a big movie career. Cosby has a big movie career, although most of his movies were flops, though. But George Carlin did play Rufus in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, right? He was their tour guide, so to speak, through time. And his name was Rufus.
On to Rufus. My jokes always had bite. You started out toothless. And you just kept talking. You wouldn't shut up. Honestly, I'm glad you died. 14 specials was enough.
Okay, so 14 I said 15. So there we go. 14 specials was enough. That was kind of harsh, though. I'm glad you died. I'm telling you, Joan's killing it so far.
And Richard, can we talk? Can I call you Dick like your fifth wife did when you remarried your sixth?
Yes. Yeah. So Richard Pryor did not have luck with women. So he was married and divorced several times. Of course, Dick is short for Richard. And he does divorce one of his wives, marries another one, then divorces her, remarries her, and then divorces her again, and then ends up remarrying his fourth wife. But he does stay married to her for the rest of his life until he passes away.
Can we talk? Can I call you Dick like your fifth wife did when you remarried your sixth? At this point, I've got more plastic than flesh, but my Tupperware box.
Yeah, Joan Rivers, of course, was known for her plastic surgeries. She actually died while getting like routine plastic surgery, if memory serves correct. I remember when I was reading about it, she had something like over 300 plastic surgeries in her lifetime. Like, what in the actual fuck? But yeah, she died. I think it was either from like the anesthesia or something, but she was having plastic surgery when she died.
Body couldn't keep your wraps fresh.
I think my
I forgot about Cosby. I got more plastic than flesh, of course. It's talking about the plastic surgeries.
Flesh, but
my Tupperware body couldn't keep your wraps fresh. So she's dissing on their wraps, saying they stink. And even her Tupperware body couldn't keep them fresh, right? Because Tupperware containers keep food fresh. But then this is the best part.
I think my pudding.
So don't throw
it down. I love it. Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers is the winner.
The flow is too relentless. I haven't thrashed celebrities this bad since The Apprentice.
Since The Apprentice, yeah. So she was on that fucking awful Donald Trump show, The Apprentice.
I'm closed in this battle. No one else compares. The only place I'm in the middle is on Hollywood Square.
So she was on that awful Hollywood Square show, and she was the middle square for a long time.
Good morning, movie bomb! I sold a bad sheep.
Oh, fuck. Oh, man. Robin Williams. Oh, man. Robin Williams' death hit me hard. I've not been able to watch. I used to watch Robin Williams stuff all the time. His stand-ups. His mind was just so fucking brilliant. If there was anyone's intellect and thought capabilities I was jealous of, it was Groucho Marx and then Robin Williams. They were so sharp. One of my favorite episodes of Inside the Actor Studio was with Robin Williams, just to watch the thought processes. And he was Robin Williams. I mean, he was so wholesome, and his death really, I can't watch anything with Robin Williams in it anymore. It's just heartbreaking for me. But I know this isn't Robin, of course, but man, I miss Robin Williams.
Good morning, movie bomb!
So, of course, Robin Williams famously, I mean, talk about an acting career. Of course, Robin Williams is an Academy Award-winning actor. He won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Good Will Hunting. But of course, he also played the genie in Aladdin, the original genie, not that Will Smith version. So he's coming out of the genie thing with Good Morning Movie Bombs. So it's a reference to his movie. I think it came out in like the late 80s, like 88. It's called Good Morning Vietnam. And he was like a radio host during the Vietnam era. So for the soldiers, every time, Good Morning Vietnam was the greeting. So a bunch of references here just with his first pop-up. And of course, wearing the famous loose-fitting shirts because he would sweat profusely on stage. Coke sweat. A lot of cocaine going around in this ERB.
Nice shoulder pads, Chief. I'm a genie in the bathtub. For some comic relief.
Yeah, so he had that unique Robin Williams delivery. I mean, just completely erratic, completely coke-fueled and driven, of course. And he would just deliver these crazy one-liners as well. Comic relief was how would you call it? Like one of those telethon type things. They would try to raise money, and they would have comic relief. It was trying to bring relief to various charities, and they would get all like the best comedians. It was started by Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, and Whoopi Goldberg. And it was something that went on for years and years and years. And they would every year they would have a comic relief special to raise money.
Oh, Carlin, my Carlin, what can I say about you?
Oh, Carlin, my Carlin. So that's another great Robin Williams movie. Again, he was an amazing, serious actor, not just comedies. So another great dramatic movie with Robin Williams is Dead Poets Society. And there's the famous scene where he recites a poem for the students. Oh, Captain, oh, Captain, my Captain, right? Oh, Carlin, my Carlin. What can I say about you?
I don't think you've had a good shit since 1962.
I don't think you've had a good shit since 1962. So again, that's going back to the story I told about what happens to Carlin in 62 when he completely changes his image.
Mork aged backwards, and Joan, you must too!
Mork aged backwards. So Robin Williams got his big break in the 1970s with the Mork and Mindy Show, which was actually a spin-off. Mork first appears on Happy Days of all shows, and then he was just such a popular character, he got his own spin-off series, and Mork was an alien from another planet. I don't remember the name of the planet, but I remember his catchphrase was Nanu Nanu. Like that was the greeting for his peoples. And the Mork spoke backwards, but he also does age backwards in the TV show.
80 years old, but that nose looks brand new, Nanu!
Okay, brand new Nanu, right? So again, Mork and Mindy reference, of course, calling Joan out on her plastic surgeries. Now he's going after Richard Pryor.
That fire makes a good shampoo. Left you running down the street like, oh no!
Okay, so that's what I expected Carlin to do. But of course, Robin Williams calls him out on it.
Fire!
I doubt fire. So, okay, this is brilliant. I think Joan may end up losing it because up until this point, I was going to give it to Joan. But Robin, I doubt fire. So, of course, Ms. Doubtfire, a Robin Williams comedy classic. And of course, I doubt fire makes a good shampoo, referencing the fact that Richard Pryor lights himself on fire and is running down the street with literally his body engulfed in flames all the way to the top of his head.
That makes a good shampoo. Left you running down
the street like.
Oh
no! So that's also a scene in the movie Ms. Doubtfire. Another reference there.
Comedy ain't easy. I've played plenty of dumps, and believe me, we've all hit plenty of bumps. But
that is true. That is so fucking true.
Comedy ain't easy. I've played plenty of
dumps.
And believe me, we've all hit
We've all hit plenty of bumps. So, of course, I mean, I've known comedians personally. I'm a big fan of a lot of comedians. I listen to a lot of podcasts with comedians when I'm driving. And comedians I mean, it's a rough road to become a successful comedian. It's years and years, and in some cases, over a decade or two before they hit it big. So there's a lot of bumps in the road. But, of course, Robin's referencing cocaine, right? Because another way of saying, doing coke is doing a bump. Actually, Robin Williams and Robert De Niro visited John Belushi at the Chateau Marmont, where he ended up dying, the night before Belushi died of an overdose. And it was written in Bob Woodward's book Wired about Belushi. And Robin Williams and Robert De Niro both visit John Belushi with they bring a big bag of coke, and they wanted to party, but Belushi said he wasn't feeling well, so they ended up leaving, and Belushi ended up dying, of course, the next morning of a drug overdose, combination of heroin and cocaine, which is known as a speedball.
Hit plenty of bumps, but now I got the flubber flow. That'll get the club jumping.
The Flubber Flows. So Flubber was like a kids movie that Robin Williams. I'm sorry, there's just so many people in this one.
We got secondhand raps. Found him Goodwill.
Secondhand raps found him Goodwill Hunting. Robin Williams wins, man. Goodwill Hunting, of course, another movie where Robin Williams wins the Best Supporting Actor Oscar. And he's saying your raps are all secondhand. You found him Goodwill Hunting, right? So the Goodwill is, of course, where people find secondhand clothing and stuff.
Hunting. Got more hair on my arms than on Monchi-Chi.
Than on Monchi-Chi. Monchi-Chi is a type of monkey. I don't know if it's a reference to anything, but I know Richard Pryor did own a monkey, and he had a whole bit about these little squirrel monkeys that he had, and whenever somebody would come over to visit, they would run up to people's arms and start sticking their dicks in people's ear holes and start fucking them in the ear. I'll finish this battle. How's he gonna finish it?
I'll finish this battle like it's Jumanji. I love the prince.
Like it's Jumanji. Okay, another reference to a Robin Williams movie. So, of course, he started in the original Jumanji, and the way you end the game is by yelling out Jumanji, right? I love the prince.
You'll never have a friend like me. Thanks, folks, that's my time. Jumanji. I love the prince.
I love the prince.
You'll never have a friend.
Okay, Friend Like Me is a song from the movie Aladdin, and he's saying, I love the prince. What the fuck? Will Smith. Will Smith plays the genie in the remake, and of course, Will Smith is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So he's saying, I love the prince, I love Fresh Prince, but, you're never going to have a friend like me, and a friend like me is actually I karaoke the fuck at a Friend Like Me when I'm at a karaoke bar. That's one of my go-to songs. I love singing Friend Like Me from Aladdin.
Like me. Thanks, folks, that's my time. Gotta set myself free.
Aw, that was kind of a depressing ending, though. I gotta set myself free. I really hope they weren't referencing his suicide, because again, he committed suicide, and a lot of people are like, he's finally free now. That would be kind of depressing, but let's forget about that one. Who won? For me, definitely Robin Williams. I mean, surprisingly, George Carlin was really just whack in this one. Richard wasn't that much better, but Joan Rivers was fire, but then Robin Williams comes in and kills it. Of course, Cosby is just, hey, fuck Cosby. But yeah, I'm giving that one to Robin Williams, man, hands down. He bought the heat, he bought the fire, and in that little set he had at the end, he killed it. So if you enjoyed that, please check out one of our other videos. Please check out the ERB playlist here, and of course, leave your comments below letting us know who you think won and which ERB you'd like to see up next. I'm Teacher Eddie, and I will see you next time.